Hello, friends. Today we continue our look at the life of Joseph from the book of Genesis. And today's lesson can be boiled down into one thought, one idea. When you don't know what to do, know that God is with you. And we'll see the example of that in Joseph's life here in just a moment. But I want to ask a question. Have you ever experienced something in your life that's caused pain or hurt or has caught you off guard or made you feel uncertain? It may be something we're experiencing right now with this coronavirus and in this isolation, quarantine time, and we're just uncertain about the future. Chances are in life you have, and if you haven't, those days will come. When I was in seminary, Kelly and I were just beginning our relationship. We weren't dating officially at the time, but we decided to go to the movies with another couple, and there were probably 10 or 12 of us that all decided to go to see the movies, or go see a movie one night. And so as we walk out of the movie theater, we walked to where I had parked the car, my car, and it was gone. And there was just a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. It's like getting gut punched, knowing that your car has been stolen. You don't know what to do. Things are up in the air. Luckily, again, we were there with some other people, so we were able to catch a ride home. But just, as we're driving home, I'm looking out every window, seeing if I can find my car, because it was just devastating at the time. Chances are, again, you have probably experienced maybe not something on that level, but something that can be as gut-wrenching for you. Maybe a friend has said something to you that was mean or hurtful, or maybe you felt this way as you experienced an injury at the beginning or the middle of a sports season, or maybe you were in a relationship and you thought this relationship was going great until the other person decided to suddenly end it. Or maybe you even got a rejection letter from the college that you've been dreaming to go to since you were a kid. There's always something that can cause that gut-wrenching, that uncertainty, that pain in our life. But the thing about these moments is that they hit us when we least expect it. We're not expecting these times to hit, but it's our response to them that really can be beneficial for us. The characters in Scripture, they were not immune to this either. Remember, we discussed last week that the Bible is a real story about real people experiencing real situations and living real lives. And so what we see in Joseph's life is the same thing. We see him experiencing just these situations after situations of just pain and hurt. And how does he deal with that? Again, the thought for today is that we remember that when we don't know what to do, when there's nothing else we can do, we remember that God is with us. Now, last time we talked about Joseph and his family, we laid that foundation for just the crazy family that Joseph was born into, that Joseph was the favorite. His mom was the favorite wife. Well, there were 4 wives in this situation. There were 12 total sons, and Joseph was the favorite. And because of that, he received the coat of many colors, and his brothers hated him. But then Joseph didn't really help the situation. Remember, he was not concerned about how his actions were affecting those around him. And so he had these dreams about how his family would eventually bow down to him. And he told his brothers about him. And they hated him even more. They were not okay with him being the favorite. They were not okay with him sharing these dreams with him. So we read in Genesis chapter 37, verses 18 through 20, their response to him, or their response about him. Verse 18, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. Now, this was the only way that his brothers knew how to deal with this situation, is they just decided they'd kill him. It escalated pretty quickly from what we can read in Scripture, but it was probably some underlying tension. Again, we talked about that last time, that tension left unresolved only builds and only gets worse, and we see it bubbling over in the lives of his brothers here. But only one of his brothers kind of spoke up on his behalf, and as we read in Genesis 37, verses 21 and 22, but when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. Now, Reuben kind of had a good head on his shoulder, and he said, well, let's not kill him, let's just throw him in a pit. And then what Reuben's thought was, I'll come back later, get him out of the pit, and I'll restore him back to his father, to my father. And so what happened is that Reuben left, and as the other brothers were sitting down and eating lunch, probably within earshot of Joseph in the pit, probably hollering out to him, calling out to him, screaming, and they just sit down and eat a meal, Reuben leaves. And as they're eating, they see this caravan of traders coming through. And they decide they'll sell their brother to these traders. Well, if we're not going to kill him, well, let's just make some money off of him. So they trade their brother for 20 shekels of silver. Now, shekels is a weight, a measurement of weight. So it wasn't 20 pieces of silver, it was 20 shekels, or what we equivalent today would probably be like 11 grams of sugar. 11 grams of silver. And so what his brothers did is they sold him for about 220 grams of silver, which in today's market would be about $118. That's what his life was worth to his brothers. But they didn't kill him, but they just decided to get rid of him. Then they took his coat off of him. They slaughtered a goat. They dipped the coat in the goat's blood, and then they gave the coat back to their father to say that an animal had killed him. And Jacob was devastated. But I can't imagine what Joseph was experiencing and what Joseph was thinking. He didn't know what to do. How does he get out of the situation? He can't get unsold into slavery. But we read in Genesis chapter 39, verse 2. Very important, one of the most important parts of Joseph's story. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. That is one of the most important parts of Joseph's story, is that in the midst of all that Joseph was going through, the Lord was with him. Now, Joseph didn't have a lot going on for him when he was in the pit or even afterwards as we look at those stories in the coming weeks. But when Joseph was in despair and wondering how life would turn out, he could rely on one single thought, one single idea, that God was with him. And the same is true for us. In the midst of all the things that we are going through, in the midst of the coronavirus and the isolation and the quarantine, that we can rely on the fact that God is with us. While neither Joseph nor us are able to change our situations, we can know that God is with us. That knowing God is with us is better than being alone in our situations. While neither Joseph nor us are able to see where the story is going, we can know that we're not entirely dependent on ourselves. When God is with us, we don't have to depend on ourselves alone. And while neither Joseph nor us can easily deal with the things that are happening to us, and we might not have an explanation for the pain and the hurt that we're experiencing, we know that we don't have to figure it out by ourselves. Because as we read in Genesis chapter 39, verse 2, that the Lord was with Joseph, and the Lord will be with us as well. Knowing that God is with us may not change our circumstances, but it might just change us. It can give us hope. And so how do we deal with this? Well, I think the first thing we do is that we just be real with our feelings. We feel our feelings. That it's okay to talk to God about how we feel, the frustrations, the anger, because God can handle it. If there's questions we have, God can handle those questions. We just got to have that conversation with Him, explain the frustration. Again, we may not be able to see the end of the story, but we know that He is with us. And then the second point, the last point about how we kind of handle this is that we remind ourselves constantly that God is with us. In the midst of COVID-19, God is with us. This doesn't surprise God. I've heard that on every podcast I've listened to in the last several months, that this does not surprise God. But God is still with us. We can read in Genesis the ending of Joseph's story. We know his high points and his low points. But we know the ending. We know how it all turns out. But in the midst of what Joseph was going through, he was unable to do that. He was just living day to day, knowing that God was with him. And that's how we have to live our lives, day to day, knowing that God is with us. Then at some point we can look back and we can see how God was working through it all, just like in the life of Joseph. Joseph didn't have the ending. We don't have the ending. But we know who can be with us. When we rely on Him, when we look to God, when we know that even in the midst of us not knowing what to do, that God is with us. Just as God was with Joseph, God is with us. And that's my encouragement for you and for me today, that in the midst of uncertainty, chaos, whatever's going on in our world, even beyond COVID-19, there will be something else, that God is still with us. And so next time we'll continue this look at Joseph's life and where his life goes from here. Again, it's not all mountaintops, but it's not all valleys either. Because God was with Joseph, and he was successful in the things that he did. There was just mountaintop and valley, and mountaintop and valley. But we can learn from Joseph's life, and we can learn how to handle situations when we don't know what to do all the time. But one thing we can know is that God is still with us.